We are live. That's what it says on my computer here. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing wonderful. Hi, Diane.
Nice to see you. So welcome, everybody. My name is Diane Rose Solomon, and I am the founder of Animal Magic Films. Here we go. Thank you for joining us for the 28th interview in the Science and Magic of the Human-Animal Bond interview series. We will be exploring many of the ways that animals help people and people help animals. As far as I'm concerned, it's a both and conversation where we all benefit from this bond. I know I've benefited immensely from my relationship with my pets and from a surprise therapy dog visit in the hospital years ago. I also experienced great joy watching other people heal from their interactions with animals. And I'm also captivated by non companion animals like wild animals, farm animals, and more. But enough about me. Now we want to hear from you, people like Steve, who are making our relationships with our pets, our communities, and our natural environment just a little bit better. So please welcome my guest, Steve Kaufman, who is the Senior Manager of Adoption Initiatives at PetSmart Charities. Hello again, Steve.
Hello.
I'm so glad you're here. So let me just read a little bit about Steve from his official bio, and then I have some questions because what Steve does, I think, is just phenomenal and fascinating. So Steve Kaufman has earned his expert status in the animal welfare space by honing his skills from the ground up. For more than 30 years, he started this when he was 5, he served as a leader in the animal welfare space, championing innovation and with passion and purpose. Bringing hands-on experience in operating both large and small shelters, Steve's navigated the complex issues facing nonprofit and government animal sheltering agencies. His vast experience makes compelling fodder for enthusiastic storytelling, debate, and public speaking. As the Senior Manager of Adoption Initiatives with PetSmart Charities, the top funder of animal welfare in North America, which I did not know before, he has broad insight to the challenges and opportunities across the industry. He leverages his visibility and connections to create collaborative partnerships that address pressing needs. Steve currently leads a team of professional grant makers overseeing PetSmart Charities' National Pet Adoption Program. His small but scrappy crew makes more than $12 million in annual grants and adoption incentives. Wow. Together with donors and partners, their work fuels the mission of animal shelters and rescues to bring and keep people and pets together. Phenomenal, Steve, just phenomenal. And, before I launch into my official questions, something just came to mind. You've been at this professionally for 30 years, and we accidentally adopted our first dog only 26 or so years ago. And that was novel then. And so the fact that you've been doing this professionally for 30 years, that's amazing because it wasn't something that I was aware of and most people that I knew were aware of, and yet you were already working in the space. Can you tell me a little bit about that for quickly before we get into the other things I had planned?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I started in 1990 in mid-Missouri. So I went to school at the University of Missouri in Columbia, which is right in the center of the state. And when I adopted my first dog, I started volunteering and then worked at the shelter. And that was my junior year of college. So I wasn't 5, I was close, I was 20. I really enjoyed it. And, they say you get into animal welfare for the animals and you stay for the people. It was a great, passionate crowd of folks that I got to meet and start a career with. And here we are 30 years later, and I'm still doing it and still enjoying every minute of it. So it was just starting in rural Missouri it was a handful because that's where a lot of the puppy mills are and a lot of the purebred dogs get produced. And so adoption was not on people's minds in the early 90s. It wasn't the first place you went to get a pet. So it was a struggle working in an animal shelter at that time. It was a lot different than it is today.
I'm sure, and it's still a struggle today to a degree, but not what it was. I can't even imagine. I mean, the story that I always tell is that the dog that we accidentally adopted, I wouldn't even known where to bring him. I didn't even know what an animal shelter was. Even if I didn't want to keep him, where would I have even brought him? Like I didn't even know. So there's been so much education since then, in part thanks to you. So I love the work that you're doing with PetSmart Charities, and I want to back up for a second because I think it's pretty much everybody knows PetSmart, the retail store. We've all driven past one, or you're watching television and you have a great new ad now that shows all the different things that PetSmart does. Boarding and games and, play dates with dogs and grooming and all the different things that one would expect. But I love that you've got this whole different arm that's just devoted to charities, and there's so much depth to what you do. And the last time we spoke, I mean, my jaw was just on the ground because it was just so fascinating. So tell me a little bit, or tell all of us a little bit about PetSmart Charities in general. Just to get us started, tell us about the charity.
Sure, absolutely. Well, to get to the beginnings of PetSmart Charities, we have to start at the beginning of PetSmart. So when Jim and Janice Doherty, the founders of PetSmart, first opened in the late 80s and early 90s their stores, they made a commitment to not sell dogs and cats in their stores.
Mm-hmm.
That was groundbreaking at the time, and similar to what you were just describing, at that time, if you wanted a pet, generically you went to a breeder or you went to buy a pet, and shelters and rescues were around for when you needed to get rid of a pet for some reason.
Right.
It was the other side, and it wasn't really thought of a place you would acquire a pet. And Jim and Janice really recognized the overpopulation issues and that there were a lot of wonderful pets available for adoption with these agencies. Mm-hmm. So they made the commitment and the decision to not sell professionally bred dogs and cats or commercially bred, and to allow rescue groups and shelters to come in and use that space to do their adoptions. And that really was one of two just real phenomenal innovations that they did. So the first one was allowing them to come in. And so after a few years of adoptions going on, customers were regularly coming in and saying, I don't need to get another cat, I don't want another dog, but I really appreciate what that group's doing and I'd like to donate. And so this was the next amazing innovation they came up with. And in 1994, they established PetSmart Charities as an independent 501c3 from PetSmart. And so that was the second just amazing innovation that really started a groundswell that I can proudly say today is one of the prime locations. It's one of the really the large outlet for acquiring a pet and finding a new pet for adoption. And so it really changed the landscape of animal welfare and in rescue. And so as that progressed and as they were doing adoptions in stores, the next innovation from there was asking for that donation on the pin pad. And from there, PetSmart Charities really exponentially grew. And that's when we very quickly became the largest funder of animal welfare in North America. And so, we have such amazing donors and the customers that shop at PetSmart that leave us $1 or $2 or $5 at the register. That comes to our team. And when you scale that over 1,600 stores, we're bringing in over $40 million a year that goes right back to those local rescue groups in the communities where those came from, those donations came from. Wow. And what's amazing about charities, there's a few points I want to make to really emphasize the efficiency of what we're doing. Those donations, as they come in through the register, our programs are very efficient. So I know sometimes when you're giving at a register or giving to large corporate donations, there's hesitation on where's the money going, how's it being spent. 90 cents of every dollar goes directly back to programs with PetSmart Charities.
Wow. We
have been a 4-star charity for 18 years with Charity Navigators. So we are very efficient. We are a small but mighty team. There's not a lot of us to process the grants and to move the money through. But that allows us to be very, very efficient to make sure that your donor dollars are going 90 cents of every dollar right back into those local rescue groups and putting into programs that help people and animals. And so two big landmarks that I'm really proud of and I'm so happy to be able to talk about today. Just in the last, this quarter, we have passed $500 million in donations into animal welfare.
I just got chills. That's amazing.
So over $500 million has been donated directly back to animal rescues and animal shelters due to our amazing donors and shoppers that go to those PetSmart stores and leave that money for us to give away. So that's just a huge milestone, and you can really understand and see the depth of how PetSmart and PetSmart Charities have been such a major contributor to animal welfare and the reduction of euthanasia and the increase of adoptions of pets. The other part that's an amazing announcement that I'm proud to share is within the next month, we will be passing 10 million adoptions that have been facilitated at a PetSmart store. So in 28 years, after allowing these groups to come in and do adoptions, those 10 million are all adoptions that have taken place and been facilitated in a PetSmart or in a parking lot, because we do big parking lot events as well.
Right.
But it is such an amazing milestone because
It's huge.
it's such a large part of the national movement to help reduce that reduction of overpopulation and to
Hmm.
reduce euthanasia. Um, and I think you get lost sometimes in some of these numbers. They're so big, 10 million adoptions. So to put it in a little perspective, I worked at animal shelters my whole career, and I work with a lot of animal shelters now. And some of the largest shelters in the country are adopting probably between 15, some of the high ones, about 20,000 animals a year.
Wow.
Last year, we did over 400,000. And in
Wow.
2019, we did over 600,000. So you can see the comparison. The local shelters are amazing work that they all do.
Yeah, yeah.
But the rescue groups that don't have a brick and mortar location can come to a PetSmart. They're well lit. They're safe places to go. The audience is built in. They can spread their message. And it's a win-win-win for everybody, for the pet parent, for the animal, for the consumer, for the rescue. So it's just such an amazing program, and I'm just so proud to be able to come on your show and talk about it.
Oh my goodness. I'm thrilled and delighted to be learning. I mean, because first of all, you didn't have these statistics available a few months ago when we spoke, and I'm glad you didn't, because I love hearing this for the first time. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
Amazing. I'm just so impressed. So I know that, as you just mentioned, you've been always working in the rescue and sheltering world. Tell me a little bit about how you got to PetSmart Charities, because clearly there was some time between when you started your first opportunity to now. What was the trajectory?
Sure. So I had worked my way through the sheltering system, and done most all of the positions, working from kennel worker up through executive director and fundraising. And so about 25 years, I worked at 5 different shelters over the course of that time. And then in late 2015, early 2016, PetSmart was going through a big reorganization and sort of shifting the focus of what PetSmart Charities was doing. And we'll get into that as we continue our conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But they reached out and said, we'd love you to join our team. And we had some conversations over the next few months. And in early 2016, I moved out to Arizona, where the Phoenix home office is for PetSmart and PetSmart Charities. I had always had an interest in more of a national scene. I've worked locally and statewide throughout my career, but I've always stayed in touch through conferences and through connections that you make in the industry with what was going on nationally. And the shelter I was working at for the last 11 years in St. Louis, Missouri, we had a very robust transport program where we were moving animals from areas of high overpopulation into our shelter because we had such a robust adoption program. And that's really what PetSmart Charities had been doing for 10 years previous as well, running a program called Rescue Wagon, where they moved animals from heavily overpopulated areas of the South to areas of high demand in the Northwest and Northeast. And so the fit was great. Things I were doing at the local level really matched what they were doing on the national level in the direction that they wanted to go. And so it was a great match. And so we made our agreements, and we came out, and this is 6 years later, and I've just loved every minute of it.
That is so great. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to shift gears, because what I loved so much about what you told me, just, I think people understand what it means to be donating money back towards the rescue and adoptions. But you also told me about some community work that you do, how you're now really working within communities. Please share this, because I think this is fascinating, and it shows how multidimensional and forward-thinking you are, and so current thinking that you are at PetSmart Charities. So can you share a bit about that?
Absolutely. And thanks for bringing it up, because that is an important factor in this conversation, is that PetSmart Charities has always been on the cutting edge of animal welfare. And we've tried to stay ahead of the curve of where animal shelters are, so that when they get there, our funding and our programming is available, ready for them to go and hit the ground running. So if you look back at the history of high volume spay neuter, trap neuter return, open adoptions, you'll always find PetSmart Charities somehow connected with either funding the drive of those programs or the creation of those programs. And so as we developed what the new PetSmart Charities was going to look like, we looked at that history, and we looked at the industry and what it looks like going forward, and we created somewhat of 2 pillars of funding. And so the one pillar that I oversee is the connecting pets and people, which that's adoptions, that's bringing pets and people together. And we fund anywhere from $10 to $12 million into adoption programs, adoption rewards, any sort of program that really brings people and pets together. And then what you're referencing is some of our newer categories. And this is what we've really been developing over the last few years. And we're really proud to announce and roll these programs out over the next few months and years, and that's supporting pets and people. So we
Okay.
have connecting pets and people adoptions, and then there's supporting pets and people. And what those programs do are the realization that as a pet loving country, we want to do our best to first recognize that pets are part of the family. And
Mhm.
once you've taken that general concept that pets are part of the family, then you can start bringing that outward and start looking at your other programming and going, okay, what are things that families deal with that would make them insecure? So in the pet and the human animal bond world, food insecurity is a major problem. Housing insecurity is a major problem. Um, and in developing these programs, what we wanted to do was, when we're looking at the shelter system and animals going into shelters, we wanted to step back, and we had for 26 years before this funded directly into shelters and rescues to help the animals that ended up there.
Mhm.
And now we're really taking a step back and looking at these programs from the next view back, going, if we can keep them from going into shelters in the first place, that's going to reduce the euthanasia. That's going to reduce the
Correct.
intake. And so we'll be able to do a lot more. And if we start with the concept that the pet is part of the family, then we're keeping the family bond together. And that's the
Mhm.
most important part that we feel is necessary, is that human animal bond is so important. um, and what we're recognizing, and then the shelter industry is moving along in this direction, is that, the old model of animal sheltering was, to help the animal, you had to take the animal. So you would
Mm.
take it into your shelter. Maybe it had a broken leg, or it had a disease, it had parvo or some virus, and you would treat it, and then you would rehome it. And all that's very labor intensive. It's very financially intensive. And when you start really digging into some of the ways we were acting before as shelters, you realize that helping the animal while it's in the home is actually more efficient. It puts less strain on your resources in the shelter, and it keeps the human animal bond together. You don't have to worry about
Correct.
rehoming the pet because the pet's already in a home. And
Yeah.
so helping the pet, fixing the fence so the dog doesn't jump out, is much cheaper than trying to rehabilitate the animal and then get it rehomed and feed it every day and vaccinate it and provide all the care, when it already had a home in the first place. And
Yeah.
so we're really looking at this change in the industry, and that's where PetSmart Charities is starting to look at our programming, is how do we move along and make sure the pets can stay in the home. So a
Yeah.
couple examples to sort of frame those for you. Food insecurity I brought up. That is one of the key identifiers that we've recognized is a reason people give up pets. So just in the last year, we've committed 12 million pounds of dog and cat food
Whoa.
distributed to 71 food banks around the country. So we're really looking at those human social services, and
Mhm.
where is it that we can combine those efforts and work collaboratively, because people that are going to these services also own pets. And we want
Yeah.
to make sure, again, we always go back to that mindset, the pet is part of the family.
Yeah.
Another way we're addressing food insecurity at PetSmart Charities is a Meals on Wheels of America partnership. So just in the last year, Meals on Wheels America has delivered 1.2 million
Oh
pounds of
my
food
goodness.
to 22,000 seniors and over 36,000 pets in
Wow.
79 local programs in 31 states. So
Amazing.
we're seeding these, we're getting that groundwork going, and we know that the local rescue and sheltering community is coming along with us. And so we know that these human social service programs are now ready for the shelters, and they are getting ready. They're recognizing these are integrated programs that both ends of the leash is what we like to call it. We're really
Yeah.
operating, we're working our way from the dog end of the leash all the way up to the human end of the leash. So we've got these new categories where we support pets and people in food insecurity. Access to care is another big category. We recognize there are vet deserts. There are large sections of our country where there are pet-loving families that just don't have access to the care. And it's not that they don't want to provide care. They love their pets as much as we love our pets. But due to whatever circumstances are happening in their area, there is a lack of access to care for those
Mhm.
pets. And so I'm not sure if you or your listeners know this, but 25% of all owned pets get no vet care their entire
Wow.
life. 50% of all owned pets get inadequate vet care. So, we really want to start to address, how do we leverage our granting and our funding to help eliminate some of these vet deserts, or to incentivize veterinarians or the veterinary community to start working with socially vulnerable or marginalized communities, so that we can get that vet care and keep that bond together. Because we know having a pet in the family has, well, as you very well know, amazing uh, health benefits to seniors, to
Yeah.
kids,
Yeah. Yeah.
building
Everybody.
empathy, building health. We could spend another hour on those. So
Yeah.
we want to keep those pets together with the family, no matter how socially vulnerable that neighborhood is. We enjoy and we know that they're part of the family of charities. So we're putting our money where our mouth is and starting to invest in those programs that will keep them together. One of the ways we're doing this on the veterinary side is we have created just 2 years ago veterinary scholarships. So now we're working with veterinary schools, and we've created scholarships to create a new direction for veterinarians to recognize that shelter medicine is an actual viable employment opportunity when they leave. It's not just private practice and research, but veterinary in the shelter world is very important, and in the socially vulnerable communities. Last year, we had 61 different scholarship applications from 23 different universities, and these were all future veterinarians that had committed to working in socially vulnerable areas. So it's amazing that we are bringing up a whole generation of veterinarians that recognize that there is inequity in that adoption space and that vet care space, and they're looking to address that. And then finally, what I'll close with that supporting pets and people category is our disaster response. So as we know, hurricanes like Texas and Louisiana, the fires in California and in Canada. Most recently, we helped support an agency in Kentucky after the tornadoes by granting a number of resources to help them help all the local shelters. So we've got all these different categories that we're looking around the country to really help those local agencies scale up what they're doing locally so that they can provide for their communities as the best they can.
Wow.
That's a lot.
And I'm so glad I'm listening to this again, because it just reminds me and reiterates to me how important this work is, and that it's not just being reactive. And I love that, how important it, because really one of the questions I asked in these interviews, which you've really already answered, is how does the work that you do help animals and people? And you've already expressed it. It really started with helping animals originally, but now it's a whole unit, it's a whole community, it's a whole family. And you're right, not only is it better for the human animal bond standpoint to keep an animal in the home, I mean, it's better for these people who, most people don't want to give up their pet for a gazillion reasons. Right. And it's also way better for the animal, the trauma of going back to a shelter and finding a new family. I mean, for a lot of pets, it ends up being a good thing. But if we can avoid that in the first place, hallelujah. And I do love what you're doing, with raising awareness about shelter medicine, and it's an opportunity. It's not something I was familiar with. It's amazing, 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 amazing.
Yeah, well, thank you. There's a lot of angles to this, and it's such a unique field, the animal welfare industry, and it's full of passion and it's full of compassion, and there's a lot of ways that we're looking at trying to solve some of the issues going on. But a lot of what we've learned in the last few years is, most of these are human problems. They're not really the animals' problems. So we need to solve them in conjunction with each other.
On a human level, exactly. So, you've shared so much about, sort of the evolution. Is there anything else that, like, the ways that pet adoptions and animal welfare has changed over the years? I mean, clearly you're addressing something really different than used to, but is there more to it that's changed over the years that you want to add to?
Yeah, there is. In the last decade and probably even 15 plus years, the biggest change I've seen is the perception of shelter pets has really changed. We've really done a great job in the rescue and shelter community of taking better photographs so that they show better, writing better bios about the pets, really connecting people and pets together. We've done better at, even in shelter design. They're traditionally located in really bad areas of town. They're near dumps, or they're near a rendering plant or something because of the zoning. The old style was chain link, lots of brick, very cold. They weren't really designed to adopt. They were really, at the time, not that wasn't really the outcomes that were designed for. And so I think what you're seeing now, all of the changes that we've learned in the industry have helped change that perception of shelter pets, and the community has really rallied around and recognized the perception before was that there must be something wrong with them because they're in a shelter. When really what we've learned through all the years, and we were able to communicate thanks to social media and mass communication in the late 90s, was most of them aren't there for reasons of their own. They're there for a human reason that didn't get solved, whether it was housing insecurity, food insecurity, they had too many pets, but whatever it was, very rarely was it a reason that something the animal caused. It was normally a human reason. So
Yeah.
these are amazing pets, and they make wonderful pets, and they're very, very resilient. So, rehoming a pet did nothing for it was still a wonderful cat. It was still a wonderful dog that acclimated just fine to its new home. And so I think that change of perception is something that's been a real bonus over the last decade. We definitely have considerably less unplanned litters. So high volume, high quality spay neuter has really taken off. High volume, high spay neuter clinics are pretty prevalent in most of the urban and suburban areas. They're working their way into the rural areas over the last few years. But those unplanned litters were the ones that were really filling the shelters up. And so we've seen a really dramatic decrease in those due to the access to spay neuter now. So that's been a very positive trait that's happened in the last decade. And there's a lot of generational change too, from boomers to Gen X to Gen Y and everything going forward. The change, it goes back to that change of perception of shelter pets. The example I like to give is sort of cartoonish, but I think it demonstrates it really well. If you remember Snoopy, 1940s, Snoopy lived outside. He wasn't allowed in the house. If he went inside, they kicked him out. Remember, he lived on top of a doghouse, and his best friend was a bird.
Right.
And then you move into the 70s, and now you've got Scooby-Doo, and Scooby's part of the gang. Scooby speaks a little English. He's, he's one of the family. He's not quite completely acclimated, but you can see the change from Snoopy to Scooby. And then you get to modern times, you have Brian Griffin. Brian's basically the smartest one in the house. He drinks martinis, he has a bedroom, but it really shows that the dog has moved from the backyard to the bedroom.
So brilliant.
The perceptions of shelter pets, even through social media and through popular media like movies and TV, have changed how we view our pets.
Yeah.
And so, I think everyone that I know now owns a Brian Griffin. They don't own a Snoopy. They're not out back on the doghouse anymore. They live inside. And so that's just been an amazing change to watch because it's happened so fast. The last 30 years, a lot of industries don't change as quickly as we have. And we've adjusted and modernized. And I think one of the real indicators you can tell that we're going in the right direction is corporate America has also caught on to the fact that people love their pets. And so it's hard to find a commercial now. Subaru started off brilliantly, and Subaru does wonderful commercials. You see them everywhere now. There are dogs in commercials. It is a given. And one of the great trends that I'm loving now is we're seeing mixed breed dogs in commercials, not just purebreds. And so, we're really, I think once you saw that corporate America has gotten on board, they recognize the value of that bond. And we're just happy we're bringing them along with us because we knew it all along, right, Diane?
We knew it all along. Exactly. Well, that's great. I love that whole cartoon example. That's so perfect and so brilliant and so spot on and great. I love it. How has the past 2 years been with COVID?
Yeah, it's been tough. A lot of the industry has really started to look introspectively at what they're doing and the services and programming they're providing. It's been a little bit of a blessing in disguise, and that shelters are getting to reinvent themselves. They're starting to come up with new and innovative ways to keep the pets in the home, which is what we've been wanting to see and what we're funding, of course. The basic concept of helping the pet before it comes in the shelter has really taken root, and so that is really starting to become the norm for the new employees of animal shelters, and shelters aren't looking as adoptions as their primary focus anymore. Some of them are shifting because there aren't as many animals, there's not as many unplanned litters. So you don't have all the animals for adoption, which is wonderful because that frees up the time for those employees and those staff to go work with those socially vulnerable areas or go work with those animals that have behavior or medical needs and get them rehabilitated. So, we did see an uptick in adoptions when the pandemic started. We also saw the media sort of jump on board and really get excited about the shelters being empty. But then they sort of changed course a year in. And as intake started going back up in shelters, we started seeing the media and outlets saying how all those pandemic puppies, they were calling them, were getting returned. And so we're really curious about that because we're a data-driven organization and we love to collect as much data as we can. And the reality was the animals coming into the shelters weren't actually pandemic puppies, as they were naming them, the ones that were acquired just because they were working from home now. It really is a drive due to higher amounts of food insecurity, housing insecurity, job insecurity. So you're seeing these pets turned in, and it's not the 6-month-old that they
Yeah.
adopted at 8 weeks old. These are pets that have been part of their family for years, which is even
It's
more heartbreaking.
heartbreaking. It's
It's all
heartbreaking.
heartbreaking, but
Yeah, I know
it's
what you mean.
unfortunate we've been watching that happen when it's preventable. And
Yeah.
so that's where we're really trying to pinpoint our funding to make sure, are we getting food to the food banks? Are we getting vet care to the ones that need vet care? We don't want people to have to give up their pets for something that's accessible in their area and they just don't know it's accessible. So we're helping to work with local groups all around the country to help get that message out that there are services available for them.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. And I do love that you clarified what this whole pandemic puppy issue has been, because the media and social media can really make it seem like it's otherwise, you know. Before we close, do you have any favorite stories you'd like to share, or anything else you want us to know that we haven't asked you?
My favorite, I know you had asked, you'd give me a little heads up that a favorite story. So I was trying to think back because I've done a lot of field work. I have these stories in my head of puppy mill rescues and other rescues. But one that really stands out that I think was one of the highlights in my career is a few years ago after Maria, there was a gentleman out of New York that was just a wonderful man that helped fund a group called Puerto Rico Animals Unite. And so I got to go down to Puerto Rico, and this was a year after Maria. And this group, we had gotten together all the owned pets. So a lot of people fled the island before the hurricane, but left their pets behind. And Puerto Rico has a lot of stray animals. It's estimated anywhere from 600,000 to 700,000 stray animals running loose on the
Small
island.
It's not a big
Small
island.
island too,
Yeah.
yes. But these were owned animals.
Yeah.
So working with this gentleman and a number of other rescue groups and rescue coordinators, we went down to Puerto Rico, and on 3 different planes, we flew them to New Jersey, to Florida, and to Texas, and spent the next 8 hours after we landed reuniting a year later pets with their people.
Wow.
And there is nothing more just heartwarming and make you cry than, a dog that is slowly approaching that person. They hear the voice, they sort of recognize it, and then they start to wiggle, and then they start to recognize their owner. And then there's pee and there's laughing, and that's just the human. We haven't even talked about the dog. The dog's also, doing stuff. And so everyone's excited. And it was just the most amazing day. And, just hour after hour, we kept reuniting people with their pets. And that's what it's all about. That's that human animal bond. That's what keeps the drive going of people in the industry that sometimes see a lot of neglect and a lot of abuse. And you do a couple of those reunites, you do some adoptions, and you put that puppy into or even adult dog into a child's hands. That's what keeps you going, and that's the drive. And I've been back to Puerto Rico since, and I have a special spot in my heart for it, and really want to work with those animals down there, because it is true, they are the ultimate uniter. They are the best conduit to breaking down barriers of social disparity and breaking down all kinds of barriers. If you own a Cocker Spaniel and I own a Cocker Spaniel, we can talk. I don't care what your background is, race, religion, whatever.
Exactly.
It's just the ultimate barrier to break down. So we all love our pets, and so glad you have a show like you have, and that you give us the opportunity to come on and talk about what we do. We really appreciate it.
Well, I'm so honored, because I know, Steve, typically you speak from a big stage to a lot of people. So I'm really honored that you were able to spend some time today. I've just been really impressed with you in particular, and PetSmart Charities in general. So I'm really, really thrilled that we were able to share this all today. So it's really my pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much.
My pleasure. So before we go, just a few quick announcements. Once again, just really quickly, this was Steve Kaufman at PetSmart Charities, and thanks again. But if you are watching this not in our Facebook group, perhaps you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Join our Facebook group, The Science and Magic of the Human-Animal Bond. You are welcome to visit Animal Magic Films, which is my company, to join our community and learn about any upcoming films and other stuff that we have going on. What we didn't do before is I didn't ask you how we could find out about PetSmart Charities. So let's do that right now. How do we find out more about PetSmart Charities?
Well, please visit PetSmartCharities.org. We have a newly launched, revamped website that is beautiful. It's got a lot of information for potential pet parents, for animal shelters and rescues looking for grants, and just to learn about all the amazing things that we funded, watch some videos and learn some stories. Please visit PetSmartCharities.org.
Fantastic. And it's a beautiful new website. I was on it earlier and it really looks terrific. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And lastly, if anybody has more questions for me, you're welcome to contact me at Diane@animalmagicfilms.com. So let's take this back to PetSmart Charities because that's what we're here to talk about today. So thank you again so much, Steve, for joining all of us today and sharing, all of this wonderful information. Sometimes it can be so disheartening reading the news and seeing what pops up on our social media feeds, and just to hear that there's good people in the world like you and the people at PetSmart Charities making a difference to people and their animals. It's just, thank goodness for you. Thank goodness. So
Thank you.
yeah. So, and thank you to everybody for spending some time with us today. We will be back next month with another fabulous guest. So thanks again, Steve. We'll see you soon.